members of the public and press who may be watching this meeting live on YouTube. I am Councillor Christine Ward, Chairman of the Planning Committee. I would remind all participants that this meeting is being broadcast live and will be available for repeated viewing. As this technology and way of working is new to us all, I would ask participants to be patient with the technology and with one another, being mindful that those in attendance will all have their own unique circumstances during this national emergency. Please would all participants note the following procedures for the meeting that I intend to follow as the chairman. Please could all attendees mute their microphone when not speaking, which will reduce feedback and background noise. Similarly, please remember to unmute when I invite you to speak. Please switch any other devices such as mobile phones off or to a silent setting for the duration of this meeting. Please only speak when invited to do so by me as chairman, introducing yourself to the meeting. Those in attendance, to indicate that you would like to speak, please send the message RTS, i.e. request to speak, using the Skype conversion facility. Please only use this facility to indicate that you would like to speak, and note that all attendees can view messages sent via this facility. Please could all attendees refer to the relevant report number and page number when speaking, so there is a clear understanding of what is being discussed at all times. When members need to vote on a planning application, I will call each member to vote in turn. Please express your vote verbally with for, or against, or abstain. A recorded vote will not be reflected in the minutes of the meeting unless this is requested in accordance with normal procedures. In accordance with the new government regulations regarding virtual meetings and remote participation, all participants must be able to hear and be heard by all in attendance. When voting, I ask that all members of the Planning Committee do so in the acknowledgement that they have heard the full debate and can therefore vote in accordance with regulations. In the event of any technical problems, there will be a short adjournment to establish if the fault can be addressed. Please bear with us in these circumstances. If an individual loses connection and the meeting can practically continue with a quorum, it will do so. For the benefit of all participants and those viewing this meeting, I will now call the name of each member of the Planning Committee and ask them to identify themselves as being in attendance at this meeting. And as I previously mentioned, I am Councillor Christine Ward, Chairman of the Planning Committee. Could I now ask for you to confirm your attendance? Councillor Anne Bellows.
Confirm, Chairman.
Councillor Stu Bennison.
Yes, I'm in attendance.
Councillor Hilary Brand.
Present.
Councillor Rebecca Clark.
Present.
Councillor Anne Corbridge.
Present.
Councillor Kate Crizell. Councillor Arthur Davies.
Present.
Councillor Dan Duke. Councillor Barry Dunning.
Present.
Councillor Alan Glass. Councillor David Hawkins.
It's Alan Glass. I said present.
Sorry, was that Councillor Alan Glass? Yes, sorry.
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor David Hawkins.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Maureen Holding. Councillor Christine Hopkins.
Present.
Councillor Mahmood Kangarani.
Present.
Councillor Joe Riley. Councillor Tony Ring. Councillor Anne Sevier. Councillor Beverly Thorne.
Present.
And Councillor Malcolm Wade.
Present.
Thank you. Could Democratic Services please confirm for me how many are not here?
Hello, we've got 6 members not here, so the meeting is quorate.
Thank you. Could I now ask the officers to introduce themselves, beginning with our Chief Planning Officer?
Good morning, members. I'm Claire Upton-Brown. I'm the Chief Planning Officer.
Thank you, Chairman. Andrew Kinghorn, Legal Advisor to the Committee and Legal Services Manager.
Good morning, Chairman. My name is Stephen Belli. I'm Senior Planning Officer and I will be presenting all 3 items this morning.
Thank you.
Karen Wardle, Democratic Services. I'm the clerk for the meeting today.
Thank you.
Matt Wisdom, Democratic Services Manager, and along with the Chief Planning Officer, I will help you manage the speakers this morning, Chairman, through the Skype conversation facility.
Thank you.
Andy Rogers, Democratic Services, supporting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Dean Brunson, Planning Performance Team Leader, helping support the meeting.
Could I ask for apologies, please?
Hello, apologies have been received from Councillors Crozel, Duke, Holding, Sevier and Ring.
Thank you. Can we now go to the minutes of the 12th of February and the 11th of March? Can we agree these as an accurate record?
Agreed.
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 Thank you, members. I will now ask for declarations of interest. Can each member individually, whether you have any interest you wish to declare?
Yes, Chairman, I have an interest to declare. In item 3A, which is on page 2, as the applicant is related to me, so I will not be involved in discussions or voting.
Thank you. And I actually believe that there are no other interests. Is that right, Aaron?
I think if any member has an interest, it's their opportunity to let everyone know now.
Are there any other members with interests? And I don't have any interest to declare either. So members, we'll now move to the first application, which is Marshlands, the Marsh Bremer, application number 19/10246, and this is on page 11 on the agenda. We have a speaker, Mr. Goodall, who is a planning consultant, but I believe it's Mr. Woodward, the applicant, that's going to speak, and Mr. Goddell, who will be here to answer any technical questions. But before we come to them, I will go to Stephen Belli to give us the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can see the first slide on the screen.
Thank you.
This is an application, members, for a 2-storey rear extension at a property known as Marshlands in the Marsh at Bremer. The application The key issues with this application are whether or not the proposed extension is an acceptable addition to the dwelling and the impact on the countryside, the impact on the character and appearance of the Bremer conservation area, and the impact on neighbouring amenity. The application is for a rear extension. The property is shown edged in red, as you can see on your slide. The public highway is along here, and hopefully members can see that. This is the application building. There is a long, thin outbuilding that runs to the side of that. Members will also be able to see that there's a public right-of-way that runs through the site and runs past the front of the property, and then skirts around the outbuilding, running to the north. This is a slide showing the existing location and the proposed site layout, which you can see, members, will be an extension to the rear, and there are other plans that I can put before you. The application for the extension, in terms of the floor space, measures 30% of an increase over and above that which was present on the property in 1982, which is in relation to policy DM20. In terms of the size of the building as it currently stands, the length of the existing cottage is 19.8 metres, so that's just under 20 metres. The width of that cottage, which is a key point in terms of whether the property extension is in proportions, the width of the cottage is 5.2 metres. The length of the rear extension as it exists at the moment is 5.6 metres. And the width of that, and that includes the single-storey lean-to element, which you can just see here in the roof form, and you can see here on the ground floor plan. So that's the length of the rear extension is 5.6 at the moment, and the width is 4.9. So the width of the rear extension at the present time is 4.09, I should say, members. So there's just over 4 metres wide, and the main property width is 5.2 metres wide. The proposed plans are to extend the property at the rear, so the overall length of the rear extension now would be 8.8 metres, and what happens will be that the original part of the building will be retained, apart from the two lean-tos, which I'll show you in a moment. But the original part of the building shown in red there will be retained, and the extension will in effect wrap around, as you see it in blue here on your screen, both at ground floor level and at first floor level. And the extension will provide additional dining accommodation and additional pantries and utility areas at ground floor level with a new boot room. And then at first floor level, the extension will provide a new bedroom, utilising part of the existing structure by having an ensuite connection through there, and I believe that's a bath that's sitting within that bedroom area, and then there's a dressing area as well. So the overall length of the new extension is 8.8 metres, and the length of the new part of the extension is 3 metres. The width is 7.78 metres. So remember, members, I said the width of the original extension was just over 4 metres, which is this piece, not counting the lean-tos on either side. And the width of the proposed extension is 7.78 metres. In terms of updating, members, there are just two updates that I want to bring to your attention. First of all, on the report, Part 2 of the report under Principle of Development, which is on page 13, the last two sentences are to be removed and replaced with the following wording, and it says, whilst the proposed extension falls within the 30% floor space parameters of DM20, it is considered not to be in keeping with the rural character of the area. And then just below that, under design principles and impact, it should actually say the Bremer conservation area, members, and that's a typo that I've just noticed. So I bring those two, those are the two updates. In terms of policy DM20, there is that element of 30%, members, and there is also other elements of that policy. And I'll just read out what that policy says. In all cases, development should be of an appropriate design, scale and appearance in keeping with the rural character of the area and should not be harmful to the rural character of the area by reason of traffic and other activity generated or other impacts. And it also says that replacement dwellings should not be more than 30%, and that is complied with in this case. But it then goes on to say that in all cases, proposals should be designed to respect the character and scale of the existing dwelling and not significantly alter the impact of built development on the site. So running on with the presentation, members, so that's the proposed floor plan, and I'll show you some slides of the property. So this is the existing front elevation view that you see from the road. I'm told that this was originally 2, if not 3 estate cottages, which was amalgamated later into one property. And the extension now, members will be able to see, this is the view that you would be able to see just from the public footpath. I'll pick up on the visibility of the extension as well, because it matters not whether you can see the extension as to the judgment as to whether this is appropriate in scale and proportions and design. It matters not whether you can see the extension from the footpath, but in this case you will be able to glimpse the extension through the gap between the main cable end and the outbuilding. Wanted to point out to members the extended ridgeline of the new extension. So the existing extension, you can just see there with my hand, that window there represents this window here. And so there is a roof that comes down following the hand there and then runs down. And then, so the bulk of the new extension is this element here, members. And then just running on through, this is a photograph showing the rear elevation extension at the moment. And as I said to you previously, members, the extension width there is quite significantly smaller by about 1 metre than the extension of the main property. But the new extension is 7.8 metres, so it's significantly wider than this, and that's really one of the issues that we're talking to you about today, about the proportions. You'll see the 2 lean-tos. Those would be removed as part of the building works, and then the extension would wrap around the existing brick extension. So these are the lean-tos. There's one here and one here, members, that would be removed. And that's a view looking from the other side now. And again, you see the existing, so the window here is this one, and the new extension is this bulk of building here. And then there's, I believe, another view showing the existing elevation at the top, so that's the view from the public footpath as it were, so it would change from that to the west elevation view down below it. And the existing north elevation as well is important, because members will be able to see the proportions of the existing building with the lean-to there, and then the proportions of the proposed building. So the proposed extension does wrap around the existing, as has been mentioned, so that door is there, so you can see the extension will include this window here. And I also ask members to note the glazing element here, because there's a very key relationship here, members, to what's called solid to void, and solid to voids are walls to windows, and you see the very small paned windows generally speaking, and yet on the rear extension there is a very large area of glazing, which is one of the other issues that members need to consider. And that's the last slide. And the only other point I was going to pick up on, members, was the Bremer Village Design Statement, because it's been mentioned in passing by the Parish Council, and it's been mentioned by the applicant in his design and access statement. And in there it talks about how extensions should be in scale and proportion. It says any alteration, extension or new build must have a sympathy with the special character of Bremer. There should be good architecture in their own right, with the scale and proportions carefully considered in relation to the building and surroundings. There's an element as well about the voids to windows and the doors, and the relationships of doors and windows and the scale of glazing. It says replacement windows should be considered very carefully. Chunky, stained timber or plastic frames will look out of place. It is important that the scale of window and door openings is retained, and the relationship of solid and void in the wall is not destroyed. And then finally, there's on the page 13 of the design statement, it talks about how members of the public might prepare their own extensions and discussions with their architect. And the last point says in point 8, in preparing and or checking designs, ensure that they are in scale and proportion to the existing building and that specified materials will match the existing. So members, the key issues for us here are not the size limit in terms of policy DM20, but the character and the proportions of the building. And officers have concerns in relation to the scale of the extension in terms of its width, in terms of its length, and also in terms of the amount of glazing within it. We did suggest at pre-application stage that a smaller extension would be appropriate. So we're not against an extension in principle, members. It's just the scale and proportions and the glazing in this case. The reasons for refusal is set out on page 15, and I'm open to question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Belli. I do have a message come up from Councillor David Hawkins, who says that he can't see the presentation. Can somebody advise me on this, please?
Chairman, it's Andrew Kinghorn here. Councillor Hawkins will have to satisfy himself that he's had all the papers and that he fully understood the presentation. So despite not seeing it, he can confirm that he's had the papers and he understood the presentation. Conversely, if he didn't, then he shouldn't vote.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that, Councillor Hawkins?
Yes, please. There was an interruption in the signal, and all I got is a white screen, but I can see you in the corner. Yes, I did get the paperwork, and yes, I did see the presentation yesterday, so I'm quite happy to vote. But somewhere along the line, hopefully the next time we have a presentation, I might be able to see it.
Thank you. Members, I will now invite you to ask questions of the officer. So I have Councillor Barry Dunning.
Yes, thank you. I must apologise, but I fell out of the whole thing as well. My screen froze and I didn't see the presentation. I heard it, but I didn't see it. Thank you.
Did you want to ask questions of the officer?
No, I have no questions at this time.
There seems to be no other questions for the officer. So we'll go on to our speaker. Welcome, Mr. Goodall. Are you there?
Actually, it's Steve Woodward here, Chairman. I'm not sure if Mr. Goodall's on the call, but he's my technical advisor.
Okay. So you're doing the 3 minutes, are you?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. If you'd like to go ahead then, please.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, councillors. I'm Steve Woodward. I'm the owner of Marshlands. It's my pleasure to be here with you this morning. My family are actually home in Bremer, but I'm speaking to you today from Bermuda, where I'm working at the moment. Hopefully we'll be able to return home soon. Our plans have been submitted following a pre-app consultation during which I did actually present 3 different options for a single-storey extension in attempting to meet the planning officer's recommendations. All 3 of these options were rejected as being unacceptable. So after receiving unanimous support from Bremer Parish Council, after careful consideration of the local planning requirements, which did include the Bremer Village Design Statement, I was advised to proceed with our original 2-storey proposal as submitted. So I'd like to address the 3 main points highlighted by the planning officer in their statement. Firstly, in terms of scale, as mentioned, the extension clearly meets the 30% limit set out in the local plan policy DM20. Therefore, it doesn't constitute an overly dominant addition. The extension does not actually wrap around the first floor, as was mentioned by the planning officer. The second floor, sorry, only the first floor is a wraparound. The actual increase in the footprint is only 37 square meters, or 18.7%. And the extension is completely invisible from 3 sides, other than that glimpse of the roof that you saw from the side elevation there, including, more importantly, from Bremer Marsh at the front, and the original cottage itself will be untouched. So secondly, Marshlands is not a listed building. It's been through many changes over the years. It was originally 3 worker cottages, which were combined. It became a shop, a dairy, I believe, and major renovations were completed in 1970. So the plan actually improves the 1970s two-story extension that's there at the moment, which you could see was more Georgian in style and not really in keeping with the original cottage itself. The extension will tidy up the unsightly pantry and the boot room at the back and the side. It will take advantage of the countryside views to the rear, and the oak frame construction with the thatched eyebrow windows is much more in keeping with the original cottage itself. Finally, as you saw, there are only fleeting views of the extension from the public footpath, as the rear is afforded privacy by the existing outbuildings and trees. In fact, only the roof can be seen, as you saw from that view. The footpath itself is very lightly used, and the public can only catch glimpses of the rear elevation. The plans have a positive impact on the conservation area overall by creating a more cohesive structure that complements the original cottage. And there are no neighbour concerns or objections, and these points were addressed in more detail in the design and access and heritage statements. So in closing, I'd just like to say that Marshlands is our dream home. We very much hope it will remain in our family for future generations. My parents still live in Bremer. The estate cottage they renovated 35 years ago is where they currently reside. So we understand the importance of conserving the village, and our plans will improve Marshlands for the benefit of all by maintaining the original character and integrity of our beautiful home. So thank you for your consideration. I respectfully request that you please add your support to the approval already given unequivocally by Bremer Parish Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, does anybody have questions for Mr. Woodward? Councillor Sue Bennison.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Woodward. It's Councillor Sue Bennison speaking. Could you just repeat, I think you said to us that you had previously submitted 3 applications before this one for single-storey extensions. Was that correct?
Yeah, as part of the pre-consultation process, yeah. The way the application progressed, I was initially unaware that there was a pre-consultation process. I was dealing with my architect, so we did initially submit 2-storey plans, as you see them broadly. They were modified. Those were rejected on discussion with the planning officer. And then I was advised to then go through the pre-consultation process. So as a result of those discussions, we put forward several different options trying to meet the planning officer's recommendations, but none of those were considered to be acceptable. So as I say, we then, on advice of consultants and of Bremer Parish Council, we proceeded with the 2-storey extension, as you see.
Yes, just to be clear, are you saying that you put forward single-storey extensions and those were rejected?
Yes, I mean, they weren't formally submitted, but they were put forward as part of the pre-consultation process. And my architects had drawn up those plans.
Chairman, could I put that same question to the case officer?
Well, you did have a chance to speak to the case officer, but I will let you do it on this occasion.
But it's because this has come up through the applicant's presentation to us. Didn't have that information when the case officer was speaking to us.
Chairman, yes, I can clarify that there were proposals submitted at pre-app stage for 2-storey extensions, and I didn't see any drawings for a single-storey extension. We did advise that a single-storey extension was our preference, but in terms of the pre-application drawing that was submitted, there was a drawing showing an extension that was 9.1 metres overall in length. And as far as I can see, the extension that's currently before you is 8.8. So there's a reduction of about 0.3 of a metre, which is about a foot in terms of the length. But the width of the extension shown at pre-app is the same as the width of the extension as you see before you today.
Yeah, so there were 3 additional ground floor extensions put forward. They were not formal,
Mr. Woodward,
They were
I
part
will
of the
come back
pre-app
to you.
process.
Mr. Woodward, I will
Okay,
come
sorry.
back to you. You will have a minute to speak. Are there any other questions? Councillor Christine Hopkins.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Woodward. This is Councillor Christine Hopkins here. The back of your house seems to be the concern with the glazing. Is there any chance that you can reduce some of this glazing to help out with the conservation people?
Absolutely. The issue for us is to take advantage of the rear views, which do overlook our paddock. We could certainly reduce the amount of glazing if that's an issue. I think our main aim is to increase the upstairs space and the downstairs space. So, we wanted to take advantage of the views, but we would be willing to modify the glazing if that's an issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I bring in Claire Upton-Brown, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to remind members that obviously what may or may not have been said in a pre-app isn't what's before the committee this morning. You have a scheme before the you as a committee, and it's for you to decide whether or not that scheme is acceptable to you. I'd also encourage members not to try and redesign a scheme in the context of a committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? We do have a letter that's going to be read by Andrew Kinghorn. If you could go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a letter from Councillor Peter Turner from Bremer Parish Council. He says as follows. Bremer Parish Council has actively engaged with the applicant and his professionals and has been wholly supportive of the proposals, which are considered to be totally sympathetic to the local vernacular, the Bremer Village Design Statement, NFDC policy, and the principles of Bremer Conservation Area. Bremer has around 90 listed buildings and structures. However, the subject property is not amongst them, and it is considered that there is no constraint to consenting a sympathetic extension in this location. The proposal would actually simply replace an earlier, more modern extension to the rear of the original property. The extension cannot be read from the marsh, where the conservation area documentation notes that views are important. It is not entirely seen from the public access points and cannot be read in the context of any other buildings or listed structures. So in terms of materials, design, form, setting, and the wider settlement pattern, BPC has unanimously voted to support the applicant. Therefore, in the current context, the committee is respectfully invited to overlook the officer's recommendations and to support BPC's position and grant consent for this proposal.
Thank you for that. Members, we'll now go into debate.
Could I speak, Madam Chairman?
I haven't got any. Yes, you haven't put. If you can put RTS up onto the side column, then I know you want to speak. But can you please go ahead, Alan Glass?
Yes, I wouldn't know how to put RTS up there. Anyway, I'm thinking that hearing what Bremer Parish Council have said and listening to what was said, and also looking at it, I would like to propose acceptance on the grounds that Bremer Parish Council have stated that it seems to be a very nice building. I'd like to propose acceptance.
Can I second that?
So we have a proposal from Alan Glass to grant this application, and it's seconded by Councillor Christine Hopkins. Can I now come into Sue Bennison?
Thank you, Chairman. Sue Bennison speaking. The application is 10246 Marshlands. I'm afraid I have an opposing view on this one. The view as regards from the public domain, I think, is slightly immaterial. We need to look at what this extension will do or will add to this building. And I think, as our case officer has explained to us in his very thorough presentation this morning, this is a huge extension which is proposed for the rear of this thatched cottage, practically dwarfing the cottage in its size and proportions, with a huge amount of glazing to the back at both levels, first floor and ground floor. And I think the officer have got this absolutely right. They are not saying that an extension is not acceptable on this building, but this one is too large, alters the character of the building. This building is very much in the countryside, very dark areas, huge areas of glazing will cause some light pollution. So I would be voting against a recommendation to approve this, and I would vote with the officers on this one. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Anne Corbridge?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was actually jumping in there to recommend approval for this plan. I think that the only comment I would add to what's already been said is that I think there don't appear to be any particular issues like the size of the footprint and so on. And I think that it's really, really important that we give due weight and consideration to the parish council's recommendations, because after all, they know their patch better than we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barry Dunning.
Yes, thank you. This is a large thatched cottage with an existing rear extension and some smaller lean-tos which are rather untidy. The proposed development demolishes these lean-tos and the old extension, and I think, in my opinion, it improves the property substantially. It conforms to the 1982 30% rule, and it's supported also by Bremer Parish Council. I think the actual design of it is quite sympathetic to the style of the cottage, and overall leaves the property vastly improved. I will be voting for permission to be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I bring in Claire Upton Brown, please?
Yes, members, if you are minded to approve this application, then you'll need to be setting out your reasons for approval, and it will have to be on planning grounds, which can't be that it's a nice application or that the parish council are recommending approval. So if you are minded to look to an approval on this application, you will need to be articulating why this proposed extension is a sympathetic addition to this building, which sits within a conservation area and is a non-designated heritage asset, and why it isn't harmful to the rural character of the area. Thank you.
Councillor Mahmood Kangarani.
Good morning. My name is Mahmood Kangarani. One question I have is that there was no reasons given by the owner of the property why they want to have such a huge extension to be built. They are not short of bedroom or spaces or sitting area, and also it's overwhelmed the whole building. And on that ground, I think there has to be some mitigation about the window sizes and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. As regards this application, what interests me is that at the very beginning there has been some discussion about different designs, and I know today we're judging this design. I wonder really if everybody has missed the beat, because I don't think the council is objecting to an extension of some description. There are our officers have pointed out some technicalities which are against the planning regulations regarding this particular one, and an example of which is the extra windows at the rear compared to wall sizes. I just wonder whether this is something that could be deferred. The applicant could go away and sit down, and we can come together with a compromise solution that would give the applicant an extension that meets the family's wishes. And the technicalities which make this one inappropriate can be rectified, and a more positive solution gone forward. I put that out as a suggestion because I understand why our officers rightly have put this down for refusal. I also understand why many members would want to support it, and I would want to support a family in making their forever home better, so long as it meets the planning criteria that we have to protect, because if we let something go through that is wrong here, we are setting a precedent that can be used for further inappropriate applications in other places. So my point is instead of this as a win or bust situation, and I asked the Clare and Brown to tell, can we defer this so that the applicant and our officers can come together to a compromise which will meet all the criteria? Thank you, Chairman.
I'm not sure if a deferral is acceptable in this case, but can Claire Acton-Brown, can you comment on this one?
Yes, members, if you consider the principle of an extension is acceptable and you want the application deferred because you're not satisfied either with details of design or other details, then it would be acceptable for you, providing you clearly articulate why you're deferring, for you to defer the application to enable officers to seek amendments to the proposed scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Arthur Davies.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Arthur Davies. I'm struggling to find any reason to refuse this. I've read it very carefully. I've looked at it. I don't think it would result in an overly dominant. It wouldn't be an overly dominant extension, in my view. It is highly subjective. That's why we've got some different views on it. So I'm afraid I can't vote to refuse this. Thank you.
Councillor Annie Bellows.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm quite familiar with Bremer area, and I agree with what Councillor Wade said to defer this because it does look quite attractive. But I think it would set a precedent, as he said, in a very old village and with the light pollution. So I don't think we should just go ahead and approve this as it is. Thank you.
Councillor Sue Bennison.
Thank you, Chairman. I think if any councillors have any concerns with the application that's before us, this application should be rejected and an invitation extended to the applicant to come back with something working with the officers which is acceptable and that which we could approve. I don't think deferment is just lengthening the whole process. If this application is unacceptable, and I believe it is, then we should reject this application and invite the applicant to come back with something that is more fitting and is more acceptable.
Thank you. Just to remind you, we do have this proposal on the table by Alan Glass to grant this. Is that going to stand for you, Alan? Councillor Glass?
Yes, I'd like to speak on this because looking at the cottage, it's developed over the years from an early thatch cottage on slightly later bits. We're removing a fairly unsightly wooden extension. I think this shows the progress over the years of the cottage and its evolution. I don't think it's out of keeping. I agree with Bremer Parish Council. So I think this shows how this cottage has evolved. It hasn't got a preservation order on it. And I think the evolution of a cottage like this is part of its character. Therefore, I would like to use those as reasons to go ahead with this and accept it.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan Glass. There's nobody else on the list to speak, so I'll go back to Mr. Woodward. You have 1 minute to present your case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chairman. I appreciate all your views. I would say in terms of the deferral and additional consultation, we have gone through pre-consultation, as was mentioned earlier. We did find that the planning officer was not really willing to compromise on any of the designs that we submitted. So we were willing to put forward a single-storey extension. And it was only after extensive consultation and discussion with advisors and with Bremer Parish Council that we submitted the two-storey plans. So I do believe that they're in keeping with Bremer. It's been given unequivocal support by Bremer Parish Council. That includes Michael Hulse, who's the current owner of Bremer House and Bremer Estate. He supported the proposals as well, and his family have owned the estate since 1748. So we do think that it's in keeping with the surroundings. So I would very much hope that you would support this application.
Thank you, members. If this is approved, there will need to be conditions on it. Can I go back to Stephen Belli, please, to explain this?
Chairman, can I defer to Claire Upton-Brown on this matter first? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just in terms of the reason for approval, can I suggest that if you're voting on an approval, that your reason that you're seeking to approve this is that the demolition of the lean-to would improve the appearance of the building, as articulated by one of the members in debate, and it is a sympathetic addition to the dwelling. Can I also suggest that rather than making up conditions in the committee, that if you are minded to approve, that you seek to delegate approval to myself to add appropriate conditions relating to materials and detailing of window features, etc., to ensure that a quality development is delivered to this building. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to the vote, I just would like to remind everybody that there were no interests on this one, and that also to reiterate that each member's votes in the acknowledgement that they have been present for the duration of the item, and if any individual has connection issues leading to the meeting being incorrect and a vote cannot be taken, the application will be considered at a future meeting. That will not apply to this, as we're a quorum for this one. So I will go to the vote now. I will call each...
Chairman, can I ask a question? I'm on the list.
Sorry, Sue, didn't see you at the bottom.
My question is about conditions. If this is going to be approved, can we have a condition specifically with regard to lighting?
Claire, would you like to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. Members, what I'm suggesting is that you delegate authority for us to deal with conditions to ensure that the development is quality development and sits comfortably within its environment, so that we will add conditions around materials, window detailing, and any details that we need to see at a better scale drawing, etc., to ensure that the development that is delivered is quality development.
Thank you. Well, members, we have a proposal on the table by Councillor Alan Glass to grant this application, and that is seconded by Councillor Christine Hopkins. And that will have conditions that will be delegated to our Chief Planning Officer. So now I will call on each member to vote on this motion for, against or abstain. Please could each member only vote on this application if you have been present for the whole of the duration of the item and have heard everything. Councillor Anne Bellows.
Against.
Councillor Sue Benison.
Against.
Councillor Hilary Brand.
For.
Councillor Rebecca Clark.
Against.
Councillor Anne Corbridge.
For.
Councillor Kate Crizell. She's not with us, is she? Councillor Arthur Davies.
For.
Councillor Barry Dunning.
Abstaining because of connection problems.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Glass.
For.
Councillor David Hawkins.
For.
Councillor Christine Hopkins.
For.
Councillor Mahmood Kangarani.
Abstain.
Councillor Joe Riley. He's not here, I believe. Councillor Beverly Thorne.
Against.
Councillor Malcolm Wade.
Against.
That looks to me as though my vote will be a deciding vote on this. So I'm going to vote against. Can you confirm the vote, please?
Let me just count up my numbers.
Chairman, I make that 6 each.
Yes, that's correct. It is 6 each. And 2 abstain.
Chairman has casting vote.
Oh,
in my case,
sorry, just bear with me a moment. So nothing's been carried.
So you want me to do the casting vote?
So it would need your casting vote, yes.
In that case, I've already said no, so my vote will go with the recommendation of the officers, which is to refuse. Thank you.
Chairman, can I make a further proposal?
Well, the vote's been taken. What would your proposal be?
Oh, so we're refusing it, are we? Or do we need to go back to a changed proposal?
My understanding is that has been refused. Can you confirm for me, please?
I can confirm that it has been refused and you used your casting vote. I think Matt Wisdom would like to speak.
Sorry, my understanding is that there was a motion to approve the application against the officer's recommendation, which has been lost. So we are at a position where we would need a new proposal on the table from someone.
Can I therefore put a new proposal, Chairman?
Go ahead, Councillor.
I would like to propose that we refuse this application based on the proposal being too large and
just repeat what the officer said.
Thank you for that.
Yes,
Repeating what the officer has said, I would like to go with their recommendation. So I would like to propose refusal of this application. Thank you, Chairman.
And that needs to be seconded. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Councillor Annie Bellows. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie.
So we'll need to go to that vote again. And this is for refusal. So, Councillor Anne Bellows.
Refuse.
Councillor Sue Bennison.
Refuse. Sorry, we're voting to refuse it. So I'm voting for. I'm voting for to refuse the application.
For, and that's the same with Councillor Bellows. You're voting for.
Yes, it is.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Hilary Brand.
Against.
Councillor Rebecca Clark.
For.
Councillor Anne Corbridge.
Against.
Councillor Arthur Davies.
Against.
Councillor Barry Dunning.
Abstaining due to technical problems.
Councillor Alan Glass.
Against.
I didn't hear that, Alan Glass. Can you repeat that? Against. Councillor David Hawkins.
Against.
Councillor Christine Hopkins.
Against.
Councillor Mamu Kangarani.
Abstain.
Councillor Beverly Thorne.
For.
Councillor Malcolm Wade.
For.
I haven't taken a vote yet in case I have to make a deciding one, but it looks as though those against have won the vote anyway. Can you confirm that for me?
That's ridiculous.
No, I've currently got 5 for, 6 against and 2 abstain. So if you vote, then that could turn if you use your casting vote.
Well, I'll have to leave my casting vote with as it was before, which is against. Sorry, for the proposal.
So that makes it 6, and then with your casting vote would turn it to 7, which means that the application is refused.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goddell, Mr. Woodward. I hope that you will come back with another application which we can consider.
I certainly will do that. Thank you. Thank you for your consideration. I do appreciate all your comments, and we'll take them into consideration in drawing up new plans.
Okay. Thank you. Members, we'll have just a 2-minute break so that Mr. Woodward can leave and our next speaker can come in to the conversation for the next application. Under 86 Whitsbury Road, Fordingbridge, application 19/11189. This is on page 17 of the agenda. We have an applicant that's going to be speaking, Mr. Hughes, and an objector who has supplied written representation, which will be read out. There are no members in declarations of interest on this one. So can we please go to the case officer, Mr. Stephen Belli, for the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for one new dwelling within the grounds of the existing property, land of 86 Whitsbury Road. The key issues are the principle of the development, the impact on the street scene and local distinctiveness, the impact on amenity existing dwellings, highway safety and parking, and the impact on existing trees. And the matter is before members because of a contrary view being expressed by Fordingbridge Town Council. I just run through the presentation, but as I'm doing that, Chairman, I can advise you of the update as well. I'll do that towards the end of the presentation. So the application site's edged in red. You see Whitsbury Road, and number 4, the Pennies, is that property there. So that's the bungalow to the north, and you have number 86 Whitsbury Road, which is the house dwelling, which is a double gabled Victorian style dwelling, and the main road runs here with a junction, as you see it there. Here a photograph of the site. This slide shows the existing and the proposed layout. So you have the house dwelling, number 86. There's a large double garage structure in the rear garden of that property. And the proposed layout, as you see it here, this is a full application, and it shows a 2-story property with a garage being removed. This is the existing street scene, as it were, so you can see the garage that's there. This is the host dwelling. The application site is on this part of the site, and you can just see here the junction. The relationship with the access and the junction is something that's being considered as well, and you see the application site in this location. This shows the proposed site layout, and members will, as I've said, note that this is a detailed application. Can I point members as well at this point to the planning history, which is on page 18 of your agenda, and you will note there that in 1991 there was an approval in outline form to erect a bungalow and garages and access, and that permission was granted subject to conditions. It was an outline application, members. It had no details other than the means of access, and so in that respect the principle was established at that time. It wasn't taken forward. We now have a new local plan framework, and the policies have moved on significantly in terms of the quality of development and design and considerations. This plan shows a red dashed line which represents what was submitted to officers at pre-application stage. And at pre-application stage, we did not express a view that the principle was unacceptable, but we were concerned about the size of the building. But nevertheless, the application that's now before you is for a larger proposal than that, and it's for a 2-story extension on this side. The original proposal was to have a smaller rectangular structure with a double garage at the back of the site, which I'm pointing to there, but that has now been dropped in favour of the extension as you see it here. So the size of the building has increased in terms of its footprint area. This is the proposed floor plans for members. So it's a 3-bedroom cottage, garage on the ground floor. This has got a bedroom on the ground floor as well, with a kitchen and the usual living room and hallway and bathroom. And upstairs then there's a further 2 bedrooms. There's a large master bedroom there with an ensuite directly off it, and then a family bathroom with a bedroom at that location. And it's this element, I suggest, members, that is of concern to officers, and the way in which that means that the site is much more cramped than it would be with a smaller property. This is a proposed a slide showing the pre-application proposal, which was for a taller building, but it was just for that blue edged area. And what's happened is that the application ridge height has been brought down in terms of the size of the building, but rather than having just that outline, we now have this larger extension to the side with its own garage, and then another garage at the back of the site. So you see the host dwelling, number 4, the Pennies, and then the new proposal is as you see it on the screen. This is a view from the rear elevation, again with the back of the host dwelling and number 4, the Pennies. And then there's some slides showing the existing arrangements, so you can see the application site on the slides and the relationship with other adjoining properties. So if I just put the site layout plan, I think that's probably the most pertinent one. In terms of updating members, Under officer comments, the correct title of the supplementary guidance for Fordingbridge is Fordingbridge Town Design Statement. So could you please read FTDS wherever it appears in the report, including a necessary amendment to reason 1 to remove the words centre and village. And then the other update that I need to add, Chairman, is that members will recall that there are issues in relation to phosphates in the River Avon, and it refers to that in your report. National England have pointed out to us that the initial mitigation proposals that we were putting forward, which was based on a cabinet report back in September last year, the timescale of that has now expired, and so at the moment there is nothing in terms of a mitigation system in place. Having said that, members, we are working very hard with Wiltshire County Council, and we are aware that Wiltshire County Council are taking this matter forward, and that situation might change in sometime later this year. At the present time, however, it is important to note that we cannot guarantee that there will not be an adverse impact on the River Avon due to additional phosphates entering the river system, and because of that we are duty bound to recommend a further reason for refusal based on habitat mitigation and the lack of a mitigation scheme being in place. So that is set out on your update sheet. So members, the recommendation on this one is in relation to the proposal being overdevelopment essentially, and secondly in terms of the habitat mitigation issues, and I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Members, any questions please for Mr. Belli? Sue Bennison.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Belli, you mentioned the application that was granted in 1991. That was some while ago. If an application were to be put forward different to this one, are you saying that now that possibly could be recommended for approval, or are you saying that because planning has moved on, that under any circumstances this is an unacceptable site for an additional property?
Chairman, I'm happy to clarify that the reason for refusal, if you read it, it says the proposal would represent an overdevelopment of the site and as such be harmful to the street scene, etc., and the spaciousness of the adjoining properties. And I think Councillor Bennison is correct in saying that if a smaller proposal were to come before us, we would probably have a different view in terms of the principle of the development and the details. But this particular application is unacceptable for the reasons set out.
Councillor David Hawkins.
Yes, can I, two things. One is, can I ask Councillor Bennison to stick to the script and talk about the application that's before us and not bring any other applications out of the sphere to put in its place. Otherwise we'll be here till tomorrow afternoon. And I would support the officer in the refusing of this. It's overdeveloped, backland development, and it also interferes with a main road. The entrance onto that road is very dangerous, and I don't think it's what we should be accepting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for officers? In that case, I'll go to Mrs. Hughes, applicant. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes, thank you.
Thank you. The principle of a plot separation to create an additional dwelling has been established as long ago as October 91, as you have just said. The current plans are broadly similar to that, the main difference being an integral rather than detached garage. The proposal raises no objections from highways or the tree officer, and as the applicant I'm willing to agree in SC 106 heathland habitat mitigation should an approval be forthcoming. Levels of sufficient daylight to number 4 have also been addressed and proven by BRE analysis. Following the officer's conclusion to the pre-application, the ridge height has been greatly reduced by 1.35 metres, the main width of the property by 0.8 metres, excluding the integral garage, and the reduced front gable now matches number 86 in scale. The overall depth of building is reduced by 1.15 metres. The site occupies, as said, a unique location in the junction of Whitsbury Road and Penny's Lane. It's a point of character transition. The tight, dense urban grain of the two-storey properties to the south and the lower bungalows and chalets with more separation to the north. The proposal embraces this by achieving a street scene that successfully stitches the two characters together. It's not a backland development per se. It is a segregated and walled off from the house. The proposal is more a street infill, as was 12A Penny's Lane several years ago. I suggest it's this, coupled with the design, that led the Fordingbridge Town Council to support the scheme, despite technically interpreting it as potentially against the Fordingbridge design statement on purely semantic grounds. The issue of building separation has also been addressed. It's clearly less than that between 4 and 6 Penny's Lane, but is contextual and reflects the transition in character. The separation is similar to that between 8 and 10 and greater than between the properties further north. To conclude, the proposal is a result of protracted planning discussions where all policy concerns have been adequately addressed, resulting in a scheme which is in accordance with CS2 and Policy 13 emerging, and is in the spirit of the Fordingbridge Design Statement and the wider NPPF. Thank you very much.
Thank you, members. Are there any questions, please, for Mrs. Hughes? Councillor Arthur Davies.
Good morning, Mrs. Hughes. Councillor Arthur Davies here.
Mr. Davies.
The thing that you said there, I just want to pick you up on, is that there is an objection on our papers of 4 Penny's Lane, which is next to the. You're saying that's been resolved?
I haven't spoken directly about the plans as such to my neighbour, but she is very much a concern for me, and should this be accepted, I will very much take her queries and anxieties into consideration. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to go around and see her because of the isolation situation, but I am very concerned about her. She is my major worry, if you like. But if you were to look at my neighbour's situation from my garden, there is no overlooking the divide between us is a 6-foot fence. The bedroom, the only window, which is a bedroom window, only has the top section, which anybody other than somebody 8 foot tall would be able to look out of, and also the design of the roof will then give more sort of access to light and so on. And as I've stated, we have shown that there is no significant light impact to that bedroom window.
Thank you, Mrs. I think it's imperative you talk to the owners of number 4. I don't say go round there. I mean, you can talk within 2 metres over the fence.
Yes, we have actually spoken together. She did come and visit me, and yes, we have spoken about the development. I do understand her concerns, and actually, yes, I would be concerned if I was living in her bungalow. So yes, I do understand her concerns, and she's more than welcome, as are any of the neighbours. Very welcome to come around and discuss the development with me. I have actually left the front gates open for the majority of the time so that people can see exactly, the size and establishment of the dwelling so far.
Thank you, Mrs. Hughes. You've been very honest. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions up here, but there is a letter to be read out from Mrs. LePage, and that will be read by our legal advisor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a letter from Annabel LePage, objector. She says as follows. Following my letter dated the 1st of November 2019, I write to express my concerns over the proposed new building to be built on the garden of 86 Whitesbury Road, Fordingbridge. Having studied the plans, I can see that despite my house being a single-storey bungalow, the new house is to be a two-storey dwelling on the south side of my property. This would cause much overshadowing of my garden and loss of light to my bungalow. I am also concerned about the loss of privacy and noise disturbance, as the new building is so close to my boundary, only 58 inches or 142 centimetres. The proposed back door of the new dwelling would be literally inches from my garden fence. I must say I am also concerned about the loss of trees on the site, as nearly all of the current fruit and other trees are to be removed. My main concern in truth is the extreme loss of light to both my home and garden in the shadow of such a tall building so close to my bungalow. I retired here from Guernsey only a few years ago and chose this spot almost entirely for its sunny and peaceful garden. I am desperately trying not to be unreasonable. Had the plans shown a single-storey dwelling a little further away from my boundary fence and on the site of the current garage, then I would have had no objections at all. I urge you to visit my bungalow to see for yourselves what a huge impact this would have on my life. Yours faithfully, Annabel LePage.
Thank you, Mr. Kinghorn. Members will go into debate. Is there anybody wanting to debate? I haven't got any names on my list here. Okay, it would seem that we are not going to be debating this.
Sorry, Chairman, I was late with my finger.
Chairman, I put RTS down.
That's Councillor Sue Bennison then, please.
Do you want to take Arthur since he's before me on the list?
Okay, Arthur, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you, sir. It's very, very nice of you. Yes, Councillor Arthur Davis here again. I'm afraid, well, I'm not afraid. I'm going to support the officers on this one. I am puzzled why the Fordingbridge Village Design Statement, why Fordingbridge Town Council went with this, when if you read their Village Design Statement, it states there that identifies there that back garden infill in Whitesbury Road should be resisted. So it does puzzle me a little bit. It's a shame there's no Fordingbridge councillors here to have their say on this. Also, the lady, I think is that the same lady, number 4? I can't remember her name now. She has a rather exotic name. I'm very concerned on her with the size of this development. So I am 100% going to go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Bennison.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree with Councillor Davis' comments. Sorry. This, to my mind, is just squeezing 2 properties onto not a very large space. There is a proposed garage to the rear in the garden of 86. The shared driveway coming out onto a junction. I am aware that county have not recommended any objections to this, but I can't help feeling that you know, 2 vehicles coming out at that junction, not a very good thing. I'm really concerned about the lady at number 4. This proposed building is very close to her property, and it is two stories, which is why I asked our planning officer whether, if as was sort of suggested back in 91, a single-story building, whether because planning has changed, whether that would still be acceptable. My personal feeling is that a proposal of any sort on this land, a property squeezed in, would be unacceptable. So I most certainly am voting with officers on this one. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. Our district is littered with plots with one large property in where people have got planning permission to build a second one. This is not a unique situation by any stretch of the imagination. So I would take issue with the fact that this is overvoted because we've let so many others be built. However, I am concerned about the impact on the neighbour, and I think that is a point that concerns me deeply. Whereas the principle of another property in this large plot, if it was of an appropriate design, I would not be against it. But I am concerned about the impact on the neighbour. And looking at the side of the property, it would have a negative effect on the back of her garden, which would lead me to support the officer approach on this and refuse it. But I would be reticent to refuse it just on the fact that it's a second property on a large plot, because we've approved so many in the past, or the council, not necessarily we have, but the council has. So that is my point, Chairman.
Thank you. We now go to Councillor Anne Corbridge.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Anne Corbridge. I completely support what the previous speakers have said. Personally, I have a good understanding of putting another property into your garden, and as Councillor Wade says, it's been done all over the place. However, I would definitely support the officer's view that this is overdevelopment. I know this area. I would be worried about vehicles coming onto the roadway where it's on a corner like this. Very concerned for the neighbour. And the final point is that I do think, looking at the plans that we have, that for a 3-bed house, the outside area for the amenity of that new property is very small, and I do think that that's something we do need to bear in mind. And it's quite interesting in this period of lockdown that we've realised just how important our outside areas are. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Annie Bellows.
Yeah, I totally concur with what Councillor Anne Corbyn's just said, because obviously I'm familiar with the area too, and it was the garden area that I was worried about if this place did go ahead, and also the neighbour next door. So I would totally support the officers on this one.
Thank you. It sounds as though somebody else is trying to get in, although they're not on my list.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to get onto the list. I'm running off a funny system. I'd like to say that I believe the officers have got it completely correct. That since the original outline planning was given in 1990, things have moved on one heck of a long way. And traffic volume is so much more, and also the local area has a plan. I'm surprised the parish council has gone against their own plan, and surprised that in the modern circumstances people would even try and get such a large development in such a small space, especially as it's overcrowding next door. I would go along with the officers, and I would like to get on with the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nobody else that wants to debate this, then I will go back to Mrs. Hughes. You have 1 minute.
Thank you very much for your time and interest. One thing I would say about the size of the garden, if you were to actually come and walk in the garden and see the footprint for yourselves, this is a huge area, far too much for one person to look after alone. It will fall into disrepair if it's left and if I don't move on. So my main reason for building was for me to move into the new build and sell this large house here. It wasn't for monetary gain or profit. It's basically to find a way of living, staying in the area that I've grown to love, and finding a home that will suit my current needs and future needs should I require some help. So yeah, you're very much mistaken when it comes to the actual size of the land. It's huge, and it takes an awful lot of upkeep, which I'm not able to do. So, but I do have concerns about next door. But actually, when you come and see it for yourself, it's not as big as it appears on this plan. And the garage, the second garage, is set back and for the host dwellings. So it's actually for number 86. It's not the big red markings that you can see there. And with regards to the trees, I've spent £1,500 on the mature trees in order to maintain them and keep them.
Mrs. Hughes, I'm very sorry, but you have had your minute.
Oh, fair enough, thank you. So I'm not timing it yet. Thank you.
Thank you for that anyway, but we will go to the vote. And members, the recommendation is to refuse this. Again, I will call on each member to vote for, against.
Chairman, before you do, just to be clear that although members have spoken in support of the officer's recommendation, there is no motion yet on the table. So could I ask you to seek a motion?
I would be happy to propose that we go with the officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Seconder?
I would second that.
Yes, that'd be.
Was that Councillor Alan Glass to second?
Councillor Ward, I think you're on mute on your microphone. Okay.
Okay. So we have a proposal to go with a recommendation which is to refuse, and that was put by Councillor Alan Glass.
No, Chairman, I proposed and
Councillor
Glass seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Alan Glass. So again, we'll go for, against or abstain. And if I can just remind members that you needed to be present for the whole of the duration. So I'll now ask for the vote. So Councillor Anne Bellows.
For.
Councillor Sue Bennison.
For.
Councillor Hilary Brand.
For.
Councillor Rebecca Clark.
For.
Councillor Anne Corbridge.
For.
Councillor Arthur Davies.
For.
Councillor Barry Dunning.
For.
Councillor Alan Glass.
For.
Councillor Christine Hopkins.
We've lost Councillor Christine Hopkins, Chairman, just to let you know.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mamu Kangarani.
For.
Councillor Beverly Thorne.
For.
Councillor Malcolm Wade.
For.
And I, Councillor Christine Ward, votes for.
And I also vote for. You missed me out, Christine.
I'm very sorry, Councillor David Hopkins. For. Thank you. So that looks unanimous. Would you like to confirm that for me, please?
Yes, it is unanimous. So the vote is to refuse the application.
Thank you. I will just give you a couple of minutes so that Mrs. Hughes can leave. We don't have any speakers on the next item. And that is 1 The Bungalows, High Street, Dameron, application 20-10106. That is page 5 on the agenda. If I can go to, we do have a declaration on this one of interest. If I can go to Annie Bellows, please.
Yes, on application, I do have an interest because it is a relative of mine. So I will not be getting involved in discussion or voting. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we can go to Mr. Stephen Belli again for the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for single-storey rear extensions, a front porch and a bay window on a property known as number 1, The Bungalows in Dameron. The site lies within the conservation area. The issues are the impact on the street scene, impact on the conservation area, the AONB and the wider countryside, and any impact on neighbour amenity. And as you was pointed out, the application is before members because the applicant is related to Councillor Anne Bellows. So members will be able to see the red line application site here, and it is number 1, part of a pair of semi-detached properties with a property known as the Limes, which is a detached property to the southeast. Area photograph of the site showing a right-of-way that runs through to the rear. Location plan and a site layout plan. The existing property shown there in blue, members. The extended area at the rear is shown in grey, and there are 2 smaller extensions at the front as well, which I'll show you on the plans next. So that's the existing property, part of a pair of semi-detached, modest property with a small outbuilding and quite a long, lengthy rear garden area. The proposed extensions then are for a porch extension here and a small bay window extension on the front elevation, and then a 2-parted extension, if you were. The first part, which is the nearest site to the neighbouring property, is shown with that heavy black line indicating that there are no windows overlooking the neighbouring property. It is slightly set in off the existing fence boundary. It's formed with a solid wall with glazing there, and then a large oriel window, which is a glazed section, much like a sun lounge would be, and then a larger extension which projects out, adjoining the detached property, which is on this side. And in elevation for members, you can see the smaller extension with the oriel glazed window there. So there's the other part of the neighbouring semi, and then the larger extension on the right-hand side as you see it. Front elevation of the property, and then the rear elevation. So the party boundary with the other part of the semi is here, and you have the extension with the oriel window on that side, and then the larger extension on that side, and then you see the detached property set to one side there, and that's another view. So the proposal is recommended for approval, members. There's no updating on this. The application is for you for the reasons set out, and the conditions are on page 9 of your report, and I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anne Corbridge.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Corbridge. Not a question to the case officer, really. I was unable to see this presentation this time round. I have seen it before. I could hear it. So I just wanted to note that and just check that it is okay for me to vote on that one.
Yeah, you did hear it is okay, but can somebody confirm that, please?
Yes. That is okay, as long as you're confident that you've understood the application, that you've seen it before and have been able to hear it, and that's okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Arthur Davies.
Can I propose we go with what's on the paper to grant? And otherwise, unless anyone's got something to say about it.
Okay, and seconder, please.
I will second that. Barry Dunning.
Sue, you wish to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was going to do a similar thing. I just wanted to say one thing. When I first looked at this, I was just a little concerned about the roof lights and the amount and the dome to the conservatory. But on reading through the report, this is a very small property, and these roof lights will just give a little bit more light to the rooms below. It is not in any way proposed to put a second floor in. It's just to give light to those rooms that are on the ground floor. So I'm quite happy with this, and I think the officers have got it exactly right. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. If you're all happy, then we'll go to the vote. So I have a proposal that we accept the recommendation, which is grant subject to conditions. That was put down by Councillor Arthur Davies and seconded by Councillor Barry Dunning. I will now go to the vote. Councillor Hilary Brand.
4.
Councillor Rebecca Clark.
4.
Councillor Anne Corbridge.
4.
Councillor Arthur Davies.
4.
Councillor Barry Dunning.
4.
Councillor Alan Glass.
4.
Councillor David Hawkins.
4.
Christine Hopkins is not with us, I believe, so we'll go to Councillor Mahmood Kangarani.
4.
Councillor Beverly Thorne.
4.
Councillor Malcolm Wade.
4.
And my own vote is for 4. So that's
Chairman, you missed me, but I vote for.
Sorry, Sue, don't usually miss you. Okay, well, I'm on the list. That is unanimous, so that has been granted. Thank you, members. That concludes this meeting. I don't have any other announcements to make other than to say that we will have another meeting next week on the 20th. So I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all very much.
Can I